Okay, so intuition. I wanted us to explore the theme of intuition, obviously, because the High Priestess is so connected into intuition. And to start with, what is intuition? I would define intuition as being when we know something, but we don't know how we know. So it's knowledge that we have that we don't know where it comes from. And there's a quote that I sometimes use, which is that intuition is understanding without a rationale. Such an understanding is not a mystical or accidental human capacity. Intuitive judgment is what distinguishes expert human judgment from the decisions or computations that might be made by a beginner or by a machine. And that's by Patricia Benner and Christine Tanner in a 1987 paper they wrote for the American Journal of Nursing called Clinical Judgment: How Expert Nurses Use Intuition. And I love that that liking of a beginner and a machine to be similar in their decision-making process. And so examples of intuition might be often, we can get a strong feeling that we need to check something, for example, or a strong feeling as we often experience intuition in different ways. So for some people, they might describe it as a gut feeling or just a feeling. Other people might have an inner voice which actually tells them things. Some people get insight, get flashes of images. These are the three most common ways. Sometimes people have a combination as well of them, and sometimes it will be different at different times. And intuition is to do with the unconscious processing of information. So we have information that's received in the moment, and we have information that's stored in our minds consciously or unconsciously. So as intuition comes through, we have this knowledge. We don't consciously know where it comes from, but it will have been processed somewhere in the unconscious. So whether this is from memories, whether this is from ancestral memories, the structure that's in our DNA, whether it's from our own experience, whether it's from stories that we've heard in whatever way. So, humans learn, don't we, by telling each other stories. And so often our knowledge can come from stories. There's often patterns that we may or may not be aware of, but that we can discern unconsciously and predict what is next in the pattern. And that information will come through. We might get information in the moment, sensory information. We can get something like 200 billion pieces of sensory information at any one moment. That's a lot. We can't process that all consciously, which is why we have filters basically in our minds which decide which bits of information are so important that we need to be consciously aware of it, and the rest goes into the unconscious, but it all comes in there. And these filters are what decide what is going to come through into consciousness. So we can have sensory information, we can have other information coming through. If we have external guidance coming through, that can also come firstly through our unconscious. I have a theory on why different people experience different guides. So, some people might experience having angels that are guiding them, or ancestors, or different ways that people understand their guidance. And I believe that this is to do with as guidance comes through the unconscious, it will present itself to our conscious minds in ways that we can understand. So this is why guidance often comes, or guides often come in a form that we will recognize. And we learn to recognize our guides and our guidance as well. There are different types of intuition. I like to distinguish between active and passive intuition. So passive intuition might be where you just become aware of something. So again, you're receiving something, whether it's that gut feeling or the inner voice, the flash of insight, just knowing something, having dreams or visions, something that comes to you involuntarily. Not everyone will have all of these, and it's a good thing to tune into your own responses and recognize that when it comes. And for a lot of people, what I'm learning is that a lot of people are socialized out of that very, very young and have to rediscover their innate intuitive abilities as adults. The gut feeling is interesting because part of it, at least, is a bacterial response in the gut. So when we're in any given environment, our gut will sense into the biochemical makeup of that environment, using the flora that the bacteria that exists in our gut, and it will send messages to the brain about the makeup of that environment. And of course, this can contribute to how we feel in any particular environment, whether it feels good or not. I really don't like big supermarkets where you've got no natural light and it's sort of buzzing. I can't remember the word for them. These artificial lights and the sort of sounds. That kind of environment will really, really probably not distress me, but I'd much rather not be there. I'd much rather be out with the trees. And this is a response. This is a physiological response. This is not just something that's happening psychologically, but it's a whole body response to these external stimuli. And sometimes when you go into a new situation, your body will tell you whether this is a good situation to be in or not. Fluorescent, that's it, yeah. Active intuition is more deliberate. It's about using a practice to gain information. So this is where you say, okay, I want to access my intuitive knowing about a certain subject, something that's happening, or something that I want to consult my intuitive self about. And we can do this in so many different ways. So preparing for an event, I really like to, if I know that I'm going to go into an event where I'm going to want my intuition to give me information at some point, then I'll program myself to do that. I'll establish a communication between the conscious and the unconscious mind, and tell the unconscious mind what information I want and when, as soon as it has it, as soon as it's processed it. So we can deliberately prepare ourselves in that way. Divinatory practices, runes, tarot, of course, sometimes working with ourselves or working with other people. All kinds of divinatory practices can help, again, to establish that communication so that we can call on our intuition at a specific point in time. Meditation. And again, as we know, how meditation works is that you have, when you do a formal meditation, you have whatever that practice of meditation is in the moment, what happens in your brain and your body and your being as a result of that meditation. And also when you have a regular meditation practice, that will rewire your nervous system, your brain, your nerves, everything within you in a specific way. So something like mindfulness meditation will help you to deliberately become more intuitive, and you can go into a meditation at any time to access your intuitive awareness on something. So then you would use the meditation to create a state where, again, you're open to receiving that communication. And it's a two-way communication. You send the message inwards to that high priestess. I would like to know now about whatever it is, and then you create a space where the high priestess can make her voice heard for you. A simpler practice of that would be just tuning into yourself at any given moment. So just checking in, what's going on here. So these are deliberate ways of creating a conscious, receptive space for your intuition to make itself known to you, basically. So I call these active intuition, because you're not just kind of waiting around for something to show up, but you're consulting your intuition more actively. Dreams is another one. We can have dreams that we don't ask for, or we can ask for a dream at the point of going to bed. You might have a blank journal and write the question in it. You might place something under your pillow that represents the question. The key is about framing a question really, really well. And then you set your intention. And this is another way of asking for the information to come to you in a certain way. And again, all of these practices, the more that you do them, the clearer the channel becomes. Another thing that comes up sometimes, or a question I've been asked before, is what is the difference between intuition and premonition? And I'd say there is a difference. So, premonition is when we become aware of something that will unfold in the future, or may unfold in the future in a specific way, whereas an intuition may be less precise, less specific, and may come from a different source. The information may have been processed in a different way. So the first question I'd ask for that would be, how specific is the intuition? And then it's about space and time, or spaces in time. So I would describe intuition, and you may have different ways of describing this as well, but I would describe it as being open to guidance to make the correct choices in the present, whereas a premonition is more about knowing the future, knowing what's going to happen in the future. And as you know, in my tarot practice, although sometimes there are little clues about sort of energies that might affect the future, I like to very much keep it in the present and use it to become aware of more information that's available about the present, because I do believe we can influence our future, and tuning into intuition in the present is a really good way to make decisions on how best to influence our futures. So yeah, we can know this looks like it's going a certain way. I can make changes to that, whereas premonition tends to be more like this is what is going to happen, and sometimes they're true, sometimes they're not. I don't get a lot of premonitions, some people do. So where the information's coming from, I mentioned a little bit before, we have the gut bacteria and other physiological and neural responses. And I think I mentioned last week, I like to think of humans as big neurotransmitters. So the nervous system, the way that we transmit information within our neurology, is that the nerves don't ever actually touch each other. There's a space between them, and they send chemical or electrical signals from one to the other without ever actually touching, and yet the information or the signal, the command is passed from one nerve to another without them having to ever come into contact. And humans have always been able to pass information, suggestions, demands to each other through this amazing thing that we have called language. And so, we can really share some very complex things through language. And not only through language, I believe we can affect each other's state. When we are in a room with someone, we might sync up our breathing, our brain patterns might sync up. There's a wonderful study, one of the most exciting studies that I've seen, about how best friends' brains light up in the same way, which I'm sure I've mentioned before. And it's just so exciting, because it basically shows that people are very close friends in response to emotional stimuli. So they're showing sort of news clips and films, and their brains, the parts of their brains which are active will be the same in people who are very close, very different in people who have never met, and a little bit in sync with people who kind of know each other but are not really best friends. And what this suggests is that we, on a neurological level, either have the ability to influence each other's neurology, so to change what's happening in each other's brains, or at the very least to seek out people with similar neurology, so to be in a space with someone and know on the neurological level whether our brains are in sync or not, and sort of develop relationships based on this syncing up. And I think we probably have both abilities. It's probably a bit of both. We probably do seek out people whose brains are working in the same way as ours, because that makes communication easier. We probably also influence each other's neurology. I can't see any reason why we wouldn't be able to do that. So this is really exciting. And in the last, since the, I don't even know how many, a few thousand years since we've known how to write, how to pass information over long distances. When writing first becomes a means of communication, we can even transmit information and states over a long distance to somebody that we've never even met. And fast forward to now, and here we are in a Zoom room, and we can see each other, and we can see each other's expressions, we can hear each other, we can speak to each other, we can do practices together, achieve certain states together at the same time. This transmission of information between humans is amazing. And so, we are very much like neurotransmitters. There is a little bit of magic in there. And although we are all individuals, we are all very intertwined as well. So we can communicate information to each other in all of those ways. As individuals, we have a lot going on in our unconscious. So this will be memories, processed information from our own life experience. And for everyone, that will be slightly different, or even vastly different, depending on your stage of life, your all the things that have happened in your life, your responses to them. That will shape what's available to you individually in your unconscious. And this gives us more information to share with each other, to transmit to each other and receive from each other. There's also the collective unconscious. This is where we'll find the archetypes and the myths. This is why tarot works as it works, because we recognize those archetypes when we meet them. When we first pick up a tarot deck, although the images might be new to us, the archetypes are not, and there will always be something in the cards that that we recognize on that unconscious level that we might not even recognize consciously. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. There's energy resonance. So, we will experience our own energy, we'll experience each other's energy, we'll experience the energy of a place. We don't know scientifically a lot about this. We do know that energy, again, it's about sort of transmission. Energy doesn't die, it can only be passed on. This we know. What those mechanisms are and how that works in terms of being a human being in an energy body and interacting in different spaces. I know from my work with Reiki, anecdotally, that we can influence our own and each other's energy. And there are studies which show that this goes on to influence things like health outcomes, mental health outcomes, general life satisfaction, by doing this sort of conscious energy practices. So I think that we will get some of our unconscious information also from the energy that we experience at any particular moment in any particular place. Spiritual sources, you know, we might have guides, whoever those guides are, whatever those guides are, who will come to us in forms that we understand usually. They might surprise us, you know, sometimes they do, and they like to surprise us in that way. And again, this is something that can't always be explained scientifically. You know, where's this information coming from? Who is giving me this information? And yet, for anyone who has developed a relationship with any kind of spiritual guide, that's very real. We know that that's real, and we know that we will sometimes receive information which can then come as an intuition to us in a particular way.